Welcome to Put a Word on It, a podcast presented by Men of Valor. In each episode, we're going to talk with a different man, but each one with a unique journey from brokenness to freedom. I'm your host, Rudy Kalis. I spent over 40 years as a TV sportscaster, then retired and joined the Men of Valor program as a volunteer. So join the conversation. Reconciling men to God, their families, and society. Thanks again for joining us for another edition of Put a Word on It, brought to you by Interstate AC. They've been wonderful folks and have supported us a great deal. We appreciate all your help. I want you to meet Darnell Ford. When you come here, Darnell, it seems to me like he almost runs the place. The guys all relate to him. He's a big old man, and the thing that's most interesting about him, got a powerful story in his life, but he's now working where this facility is back in the old neighborhood where he used to run. Altogether different man back then, and then God changed him to the point that he's now here changing lives in his old neighborhood. So this is your old neighborhood, right? You grew up in this neighborhood.
Yes.
How long, how old were you when you came here? Were you born here?
I was born and raised in Nashville. I grew up for the most part in the Melrose area. But around 1994, we moved here. I was already out of high school, but I was still living at home. And so from 1994 until now, I've pretty much been in the Antioch area.
So what kind of a kid were you in this area?
So like I said, I pretty much grew up in South Nashville. I would kind of come to Antioch, to the mall and stuff like that. But it wasn't until I was probably about 19 that I really started being a menace to society, if you will, selling drugs, using drugs, forgeries, credit card fraud, different things like that, around Hickory Hollow, in the mall, outside of the mall. So that's pretty much from about 19 until, in 1994, until around 2009. That was the very last time that I committed a felony and was arrested.
How does a kid get into that? I don't think you weren't raised that way.
No, I wasn't. A lot had to do with the culture, music. In the 90s, drug dealers were, you looked up to drug dealers because they had the money, the cars, notoriety, fame, I guess, material things. And I had a relative that was a drug dealer, and I kind of idolized him and liked being around him because he was instrumental in my life as a child, playing basketball, hanging out, and so as he progressed, in his life, going down the wrong road, I still looked up to him. And so as I got around 17 or 18, I kind of was interested in selling drugs, but I really didn't do a lot of it. I pretty much worked. But once I really got to using drugs, selling drugs became pretty much the normal thing to do to try to maintain your habit.
Did you have parents at home, or were you a single parent family? Or
no, both of my parents were at home. The only thing is my dad worked pretty much 16 hours a day. And at times my mother worked 16 hours a day. So me being the oldest in the household, I was kind of the one that, babysat my brothers and did a lot of the things that adults were supposed to do.
But you're doing wrong, right? Or do you not?
I knew I was doing wrong. And so that's why I would kind of waver in and out. I would try to do it, but I was like, I can't do this. I got 2 jobs. I was 18 with 2 jobs. But, at 18 and I didn't go to college, I started going to clubs and so I started kind of spiraling just out of control, smoking marijuana, getting laid off from a job. So I spent more time hanging out And so it just, one thing led to another. And, the crowds kind of change, from high school. You start hanging around people that are kind of doing the same thing that you're doing. So smoking weed, drinking, partying, and then, it just escalated. It went to using cocaine. I found myself being around other people doing different things. And if, there's this old saying, if you stay in a barbershop long enough, you're bound to get a haircut. And so that's typically how it happened.
What finally got you in prison?
So my first time going to prison was 1997. I actually caught a drug charge in Wilson County, just a small 2-year sentence. They wasn't even trying to get me. They were getting someone else. And I just so happened was the guy that took the drugs to them. They were my drugs, but I took them to the informant, and I caught a 2-year sentence. And I wound up violating that with another set of felonies. And so instead of serving my time in the county jail bond in Wilson County sent me to prison on a 2-year sentence.
Well, what finally gets you to the point of saying, man, this ain't right. This ain't a way to live?
I was in and out off and on. I was in and out of church off and on. I actually was saved in 1997. I came to know the Lord, started reading his word, and but I just couldn't, I just, really what it was, I was saved, but my mind wasn't renewed. And so, I kept having this longing to go back to the very same things that got me in trouble in the first place. And it was 2009. I had just been released from Williamson County Jail. I was out on Thanksgiving Day, actually. And that following Saturday, I was rearrested with 5 new charges right here in Antioch at the Target. It's no longer a Target, but the old Target in Antioch. And it's a long story with that, but when I was arrested, it was like I came to my senses, almost like the prodigal son. Like, I don't have to live like this. I was just free. I was just released, and now I'm being rearrested. And it just became so clear to me that all my charges were pretty much based on me using drugs. You take away the drugs, I wouldn't be getting arrested. So
how did Men of Valor get into your life?
So after being arrested in Metro, I wound up putting my sentence into effect, and I was transferred to Core Civic. Back then it was called CCA. And so I was actually put in the unit where the Jericho Project was, Men of Valor. And so I wound up moving down the hall, working in the kitchen, and I was going to court on my new charges. And I ended up back in the Jericho pod, and I just knew that that's where I was supposed to be. And I signed up for the Jericho program. I did a year, and I was released to the aftercare program. I did a year, and I've just been with Men of Valor ever since.
Yeah, you're an administrator now. Do you look back and you say, wait a minute, how did I stick with this? How did this thing change my life?
Well, outside of receiving salvation, this has probably been the best thing that's ever happened to me. It just changed my whole way of thinking, my walk. I really understand what it is to be discipled. I fit in. The men on staff just work with me, and you're looking at fruit of the ministry. You just don't get this. I don't feel like you really get this like just attending a church. Men of Valor is just something special for men that come from my background.
Well, the name of the program is Put a Word on It. Have you? I know you've been thinking about it a little bit. What comes to your mind?
What comes to my mind is we're transformed by the renewing of our mind. It took men coming alongside me to help me see things from a different perspective. You know, Proverbs 3 talks about lean not into your own understanding, but in all thy ways acknowledge him and he will direct your path. I come to realize that my best thinking got me 11 felony convictions. You know, I come to realize that my best thinking kept me on drugs. And so I try not to lean on my own understanding anymore.
And you got to see a man to be a man. So you've
Right.
been around men. You like the idea now of putting yourself up there and saying, look, I'm transformed. I'm a man of faith. You guys can do it too.
Mhm.
Is that important to you?
Yes, it's very important. I actually get to give back in the very communities that I took from. In the words of Carl Carlson, now I have become a giver instead of a taker.
Well, you sure are a giver. You're a pleasure to be around. Thanks.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed that time with Darnell. So let me put a word on it from what I saw. I like the word transform because that's what happens to us. We become a new man inside. God changes all of that. I like how he said you become a giver instead of a taker. It's interesting, as a Christian, you have to die in order to live. It's such a odd sort of situation that people don't understand. But that's what it means to be transformed. And now he's transforming the lives that are here at this facility. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next time as we put a word on it.